Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for that wonderful introduction to the arts and the arts in our lives and the arts in culture and the arts in society. Whether the panelists to get settled here. I'm excited about this morning's presentation. Good morning once again and welcome. Thank you to the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Educational Accomplishment, Attainment, Achievement for hosting us. My name is Chris Walker, and I'm a professor in the dance department and director of the Division of the Arts. I'm also the founding artistic director of the First Wave program in the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives, which is a prime example of our topic today. And I'm excited to bring together this panel to discuss activism and the arts, building legacies in Wisconsin and beyond. We've invited 4 leaders today from campus and our community to share their work and to help us see how legacy carriers with vision are shaped through the work and the programming that they do. Any process of building legacies in Wisconsin and beyond must begin with remembering, even before the founding of the state and this university in 1848, creativity, the arts and design were woven into the fabric of this region. Here at UW-Madison, we occupy ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Tejope since time immemorial. Today, we respect the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. Throughout our campus, you'll find effigy mounds. These are architectural earthworks built in different shapes, including animals and spirits. They are visual reminders and evidence that the arts and the making of art is a fundamental human impulse that carries within it powerful legacies, powerful responsibilities that charge us even some 2,000 years later. Legacies that manifest as guided pathways through our campus, spaces that are shaped by designers, artists, folks who are asking us to think differently, to be inquisitive, to open our minds to possibilities, to difference. The arts and design on our campus exist to inspire new and different, brighter futures. And in the spirit of legacies, I want to take a moment just to speak to a couple of the firsts that we have produced at UW-Madison. I had no idea slides weren't being advanced because I am so enraptured with the beauty of this room. It's the first time I looked back and realized, and then I looked over at Alex and he's like, what's going on? But that is fine because we're having a conversation, and that's what today's panel is going to be. I just want to set the stage for this wonderful space that we're in called UW-Madison and this phenomenal conversation that we're having about the arts. We were the first here to offer a degree in dance, centering the body as artistic expression, as cultural expression, as physical being, as body, as belonging. We were the first to grant PhDs in communication arts, the first studio art program in glass. We were also the first to host music and visual artists in residence. And in affirming legacies, we are home to the Wisconsin public media, the oldest in the nation. I have absolutely the wrong notes. Can you please? Thank you. Okay. My apologies, everyone. I seem to have mixed up my notes here. And maybe I'll just go off script, which the provost loves so much. Let's do that. So here at UW-Madison, We boast a large community of over 1,000 undergraduate students in 13 majors and 12 certificates. And why I'm painting this picture is because we have a unique infrastructure for the arts, the academic arts at UW. They exist across 10 departments and across 4 schools and colleges, 3 primary schools and colleges. The Division of the Arts, as a unit, unifies and catalyzes this diversity that is across our campus, which involve academic arts and co-curricular units like the Chazen Museum and the Center for the WID, the studio, Wheelhouse Studios, the Wisconsin Union Theater, and so on. We bring this work together and help to foster and advocate for inclusion, diversity, equity, and access across the arts. We have a new vision that we introduced last year, the arts for everyone, everywhere, with a focus on access, advocacy, and of course, inspiring innovation. And one of the guiding visions of this, principles of this vision, is what's bringing this panel together. That the arts offer a greater understanding of the world, express and challenges points of views, explore and addresses injustices, and celebrate all aspects of humanity. You see, this is affirmed in the work of each of the individuals sitting here today, who I'm excited to introduce shortly. They create new spaces for legacies to be shaped, giving each generation a way to enhance our culture and broaden our perspectives, allowing us to imagine, to innovate, grow, and change. Our panelists' work demonstrate all forms of artistic expression, experience, and interpretation are fundamental paths to making meaningful progress in inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and of course, belonging, which is centered then on the individual. And the arts allow the individual to center themselves in an experience. The division of the arts views IDEA work as integral to everything we do, recognizing that addressing racism and dismantling systems of oppression is an ongoing process, both for our individual staff members, for the organization as a whole, and for the programming that we produce. We concentrate on 5 areas to improve diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, and these are communications, outreach, of course, our internal workplace culture, programming, and our student support. We introduced last year a new program, the Activism Student Action Program, which is a fund we call ASAP. It's urgent. It provides students with direct and immediate financial assistance for student-led endeavors that are at the intersection of arts and activism, used to address social issues, facilitate dialogue, and create space for social engagement. The arts at UW create the core spaces for culture and community to thrive on campus and to heighten that sense of being and belonging for all Badgers. The arts are central to the idea of belonging. The arts are central to the feeling and being of belonging. Student-led activism projects included, and I'll take a moment to share why these programs are important to building future legacies, because what we're funding are student leaders who are shaping the spaces that are important to their engagement. Educational card game that takes players on a journey to learn and explore Africa's rich diversity. Another was a celebration of the intersecting queer and Asian identities at an open mic. There was the integration of art into the Fall Kickoff for Dreamers, a student organization that advocates for undocumented and DACA student recipients, and a durational performance art piece celebrating queer identity. These student-led creative spaces offer deep significance for the sense of belonging here at UW-Madison. Similarly, our interdisciplinary artist in residence program bring together diverse communities of students, faculty, and community members across culture, gender, art, and practice, as well as across areas of study. Belonging goes beyond inclusion here to mean that individuals feel valued and involved in shaping their communities, as well as empowered to express the need to receive care. And that is why these 4 individuals are here today. We believe that interdisciplinary practice in the arts can dismantle barriers and build bridges, cultivate intellectual diversity, and offer opportunities to people who've been excluded from traditional modes of inquiry and practice. And through the program, we've been able to bring together artists over the last 20 years to build communities of belonging. I want to now take a moment and introduce the panelists who are here with us. You see there's an empty chair. We're still in a pandemic. And Dr. Kelly has sent a few words, and I'll make sure I share those as we go through the panel. But I want to introduce our panelists today, beginning with Professor Helen Lee. Professor Helen Lee is an artist, designer, and educator. She's an associate professor and head of the Glass and Art Department and faculty director of The Studio, a residential learning community that houses more than 60 student residents from all majors in a co-ed living environment. Invite Professor Lee to speak to us about her work and programming. Professor Lee.
Wonderful. Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to speak today to the Glass Education Exchange, what I'll call GEEKS for short. I am an artist, and so I have a creative studio practice. I have a pretty expansive teaching practice in terms of what sorts of audiences I teach to. And this project, like much of my scholarship, is somewhat of a hybrid between my teaching, my research, and my service. Great. So UW-Madison is renowned for being the first academic glass program in the nation. It's one of the treasured institutional firsts. And this story often sort of gets misconstrued. The key aspect that I really want you to hold onto with respect to this narrative is the fact that Harvey Littleton put glass in the hands of artists in the US. Those are sort of the parameters at play. I hold great reverence for this history, but I also hold an equal amount of criticism for the ways in which this narrative has been perhaps overly magnified at the expense of many other narratives that have been undertold. But to also put some details around what it means for artists, what significance this development had, it means that today, if you meet a glass artist in the world, there's a 65% chance that they studied glass in an academic institution and got an undergraduate degree. It also means it's almost 40, 45, 50% chance they went so far as to get a master's degree in glass. My husband is a machinist. Glass, machinery, hand skill-wise, they're not that much different, but his education existed in community college, and they're sort of very different tracks. So it really did shape sort of what glass art became and how it exists in the world. I'm gonna leave my notes. When I was hired here, it was really heartwarming because so many alumni came out of the woodwork to congratulate me. They were thrilled that there was a woman in the leadership position of this program. They were thrilled it was a woman of color. And the person who resonated the most with me was the woman who did not get this job in 1981 reached out to me to congratulate me. And so it was in that moment that I realized me getting my first teaching job had much greater significance than just me getting my first teaching job in the landscape of glass art. And it's also the case that I'm not the first female Asian glass artist to hold such a role. All the way back in the first generation of glass artists was an educator named Ruth Tamura. And this is documentation of her with the first generation glass artists. She ran the program at CCAC, now known as CCA. She wrote the graduate curriculum there. She wrote the grant that had enabled the artists to travel to Pilchuck and begin Pilchuck Glass School, renowned glass school. 99% of literature you'll see about Pilchuck Glass School only credits Dale Chihuly. So you can add that sort of asterisk to your mental note about who founded Pilchuck Glass School. So Glass Education Exchange is something, it's my pandemic baby. When glass educators in the spring of 2020 were forced to teach glass online, everybody panicked. A discipline that's contingent on breath, hard sell. So everyone started sharing their resources, opening up their artist talks, and I sat in one and felt really uncomfortable with the fact that I was witnessing 100 people in this room representing probably a dozen students from 10 different schools, and I knew that the artist was not getting paid commensurately for this type of exposure and value they were bringing. So I raised my hand and asked, who wants to pool money and make a virtual visiting artist lecture series? Everyone said, that's a great idea. And then I said, oh God, then I had to be the one to make this happen. I sat on that for a while, and the summer of 2020 happened. And it sort of just compounded this in terms of me reacting to my field's somewhat problematic response to that moment, as well as the knowledge that all of a sudden BIPOC voices would be in high demand. And for those voices, of all voices, to be undervalued felt sort of not going to happen on my clock. So I hired 2 recent graduates to build a platform called Geeks, and we host a virtual visiting artist lecture series with 1/2 of the GLASS programs in the US as subscribers and supporters of this. And as a subscribing institutions, it's designed for asynchronous engagement. And so students, it's produced, it's not just sort of a recorded Zoom talk, it's produced for educational value, it's produced for longevity. And as a subscribing institution, students then watch the content, submit questions, and those questions are folded into the follow-up Q&A, which happens after the fact. And in doing so, we are effectively building a virtual textbook for contemporary glass education. Those are the first 2 seasons. This is the 3rd season. I'm thrilled to say that we got support from the Center for Craft this year, which is enabling us to move the Q&As into a podcast space, which hopefully will increase our engagement. I have a suspicion I'm running along on time, so I'm going to start cruising here. We also support some other programming, including a Flame affinity group. Flame working is really important to support because it's underserved in academia, and it's probably the most highly accessible form of glassworking, in that a young 20-something-year-old can spend a low 4-digit number and have a shop to work out of indefinitely, as opposed to, as a furnace worker, I can blow $1,000 in a shop, renting a shop, in one weekend in an urban center that might have such a facility. We support a BIPOC co-learner affinity group, which means all of the individuals who are more isolated in their programs have opportunities to network with other individuals throughout the Glass Education Network in the US and abroad. We support a Geeks book club in which we are addressing issues of looking at texts that are speaking to the history of erasure, what does allyship look like, etc. And the Writing Center, which might be one of my favorite things. Every college has a Writing Center, but as an artist who belongs to a very obscure discipline of glass, oftentimes Writing Center, those people don't necessarily know much about art or glass in particular. There's a very particular vocabulary that comes with that. One of the things that's been lovely about Geeks is seeing who comes out of the woodwork to volunteer their time. This is Anna Matisse Hickey Donifer, who's the daughter of studio glass artist Laura Donifer. She grew up in the glass world. She got her master's at Bard. She's currently a senior curatorial research assistant at the Met, and she is accessible to anyone in the field of glass on a sliding scale basis on Sunday afternoons to help workshop your artist statement. Another thing that's been humbling is learning the utility these types of resources have. So students who are ESL, it's a shocking percentage that seek her out. So to summarize, the Geeks platform is built on values of respect, accessibility, and archive, meaning that we're working towards building an archive for value retention. We're specifically addressing particular concerns and trends in the field with respect to the pattern of attrition. We are working towards retention in glass. With respect to tokenism, we're working towards collaboration and adequate compensation. I should credit to 2 alumni of the glass program at UW who have been instrumental in helping me build this platform, Ben Orozco and Emily Leach. In responding to the model of singular pattern in my very small niche field with plurality, more narratives, replenishing the archive with stories that have not yet been told. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Lee. And introduce our next panelist, Dr. Yorel Lashley, professional musician and director of the programs for UW's PLACE, Professional Learning and Community Education, and the director of the Student Empowerment for the Center for Arts and Education and Social and Emotional Learning. He founded and is the director of Drum Power, which helps young people develop and practice social, emotional skills, discipline, community, and leadership using West African, Afro-Brazilian, and Afro-Cuban percussion. Dr. Lashley.
Thank you. Thanks. So, I'm going to use the podium since I brought a piece of paper. Hopefully y'all can see me over this. Look at that. It's high tech up in here. All right. That's good. All right. Thank you, Dr. Charleston. New futures. I'm hearing a lot of ideas that I like. Belonging. We'll talk more about that. Raise your hand if you heard of the UW Community Arts Collaboratory. Few folks. Okay, thank you. So, the Arts Collab is a group of 4 programs, Whoop and Soccer, Drum Power, Performing Ourselves, and then also Foul House. And basically one is Whoop and Soccer is creative writing focused, where students write plays and short stories and have them acted out by adult professional actors, started by one Erica Halverson, who now is the chair of curriculum and instruction. Yes, she's earned the applause for sure. And then Performing Ourselves was started by Kate Corby, who's in the dance department. Now I think is supporting very heavily theater and drama as the chair over there, but along with her partner Mariah Lefebvre, and they do movement, creative movement. And then Foul House is Faisal Abdullah. I don't know where Faisal's not here today, huh? Who does visual arts, often with adjudicated students. And then Drum Power is my program, which is started in 2001 up in Harlem in New York City as me trying to take the lessons of being a professional percussionist and a youth worker who started here at the South Madison Community Center before it was the Boys and Girls Club, and taking those lessons and making those opportunities for young people to practice life skills. And that was before it was popular to call it social and emotional learning. I like to joke, we like to rename things and pretend that they're new. But any solid teacher does this work all the time. So this is what the work looks like for me. It's about power. I think that's also what the work of thinking about diversity and inclusion and going down that path is also about power. Often we get enthralled with the means to the end and forget the end. But the end is empowerment. It's kind of trying to take a liberatory mindset and move that forward. And thinking about and building on diversity in inclusive ways is the means to that end, but it's not the end in and of itself. So these are what some of the students look like in Drum Power as they're empowered. These are the goals as we think about it: to inspire hope, to pave the way to dreams, and allow students to form their own goals, right? These are all just human needs, really. In Drum Power, we're focusing on young people, but I would argue that these are the goals for everyone, and that social emotional learning is now a way we think about just creating opportunities to practice skills that then allow students to reach those goals. Most generally, just equipping ourselves to be whole people who have a functional awareness of our own identities, feel we have healthy connections, belonging is a healthy connection, and the ability to make positive change and impact our own world and the communities around us. That got a little janky, didn't it? Seems to be a slide missing. Let me see if it's there somewhere. No. So there's a couple slides missing. So I will talk to you about the slide that's missing. So one of the things we try to focus on is identity, agency, and belonging. If you're familiar with social emotional learning, then you may be familiar with the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning, which is CASEL down in Chicago, or the Aspen Institute, which is another bunch of folks, or any number of other folks throughout the country that focus on this work. But if you look carefully at what it's all about, there are really three buckets. Identity, that is understanding ourselves, having some idea of what's important to us, who we are. That gets into understanding who we are culturally, historically, but also in terms of what's important to us. So identity, and then belonging. So this idea that we have connections, healthy connections to others, that there's a special place for each and every one of us in this world, which was pause to think about that, because it seems like a obvious thing, and for some it's a very easy thing to have, and for others not so much. And some moments we feel more of that than others. But so identity, belonging, and then agency. There's power again. The ability to have impact. I think of this as the same as what we think about for adults, right? You go see your therapist. Therapist focuses you on thinking about feeling seen, heard, and valued, right? Which, to be seen, is a form of identity, that others can recognize us and know us enough to anticipate some of the things that we need and know what some of the things are that we need, and then provide them. And then to be heard, right? You don't feel heard. Somebody just listens to your story, but then it doesn't result in action. Do you feel heard? I don't. That you feel heard when your words, your ideas, and thoughts can move other people to do something. And then you feel valued as well when there's movement. But when there's movement, you also feel like you have agency. So those are the same things that we need as human beings: identity, agency, belonging, that we work with in terms of social emotional learning for students. So this very funny looking slide here, which I guess this didn't transport well, just talks about how we get at that through drum power. Professor Walker talked a little bit about identity, talked about the three pillars for drum power, which are community, discipline, community, and leadership. Discipline defined as using my energy for good things, so around decision making, around sort of understanding what it is to be in the world. You get into social awareness and all that stuff lives there. But it's about action, right? Same as our diversity and equity work and inclusivity work, about action. Each one of these is an actionable thing. It's not something you walk into a classroom and see on the wall. It's like a value statement. It's deeper than that. Then community is supporting so I heard Dr. Charleston talk about community earlier today. Community is consciously selected because every one of us and every young person comes into a space knowing what that is. They are already expert. They know what they give to communities. They know what they get back from communities. And we just have to convince them that this thing we're doing together is yet another healthy community. But so it's a very academic or classroom-based definition, supporting my own learning and the learning of others. I think of it more of just supporting myself and others broadly. And then leadership, doing the right thing when you have to do it by yourself, and especially when no one is watching, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff packed in there. But mostly about folks, young people, understanding, forming their own goals, figuring out what they think is the best course of action, what is going to lead to positive benefit for them and the people they care about, and not doing things because somebody's going to give you a pat on the back. The positive reinforcement is very healthy and necessary, but shouldn't be the main motivation. So we're talking about intrinsic motivation. And the stay thing you see on the top, those 4 boxes, is just how we think about selecting these competencies if you're doing anything in an SEL sort of way, translating them into language that's about what students can understand and actually that they contribute to. Community, for example, or the definition for discipline, for example, has got a definition that I stole from a young person who said their karate sensei told them discipline was using your energy for good things. Then that they're actionable. A is for action, and then the green little funny-looking thing up there you can't see is a Y for youth empowerment. That always rose again into youth empowerment, and that's the goal. So you guys are probably sensing that theme now. So I want to share just a couple of quick stories, maybe one. I'm going to come back to that, though. So some of the youth empowerment and activism for us has looked like this. These are some students. Some of them were current members of Drum Power, others alumni. One young man wearing the mask there is actually an ITA student who came through here as a UW right now. And one of the other students who worked on this mural is also UW-Madison student now, too. So Drum Power is trying to help the university out, bring some students in here with already an activist mindset. But this is a mural we did at the Black Lives Matter area. It actually hung for quite a while right on the Overture Center. And part of activism is looking for opportunities to affect the world around you, to bring a liberatory mindset. And I feel like my job in instructing the students was just to empower them to be able to do that. So, and this allowed them to sort of use art as to project their own hopeful demands toward transformation. So you can see a couple of students painting. What they did was we did 3 panels all together. We ranged in age from, at that time, I think we were like 9 or 10 till 16, 17, 18. But everybody got to do different things. So I designed 2 of the panels, and then I had the students design their own, and they could do whatever they want with it. And it was also a community activity. Where's Susan Day? She here somewhere. There, Susan Day, my partner. She works at the UW Arboretum. She helped do this mural. You might have seen my mother in one of the shots. She also helped do this mural. To be an activist is to live a life toward liberation. You don't just turn it off and on. So, for us, 2 panels on the right, one with the Black Liberation flag. That's a list of names of folks we researched, and Susan then hand-painted every last one of those names of folks who've been taken through police violence throughout history, throughout the United States. The panel in the middle is actually the Drum Power logo, which usually says Drum Power, but for this it says Black Power. When I use a signal to get the students' attention, I do this. Only once or twice over the last 15, 20 years of doing this has somebody said Black Power when I did that. But I chose it on purpose. But also as a powerful symbol. But in this case, we took it back. And then on the left is a panel that the students created. They felt like they could see other people suffering. They were showing empathy. They had a hope for peace throughout the world. you know, and then there's a quote there that I can't even read because my eyes aren't good enough anymore. All right. So, I'm into the wrong one now. So I want to go back briefly to here. So I just wanted to leave you with one story because I think the work of connection is super important, and that connects to this theme of belonging. When I was in Harlem, well, I'll leave it with two. So there was a young student named Kira from here in Madison, and she was in drum power, and we used to have, at one of the schools, Lowell Elementary School, and we used to have Read Your Heart Out. I don't know if any of you heard of that, but it's where they bring African-American parents into the school for the day, and they read to all the different classrooms, and then they have a celebration for them to thank them for that time. And at Lowell, the celebratory team opportunity would include drum power students performing for them a short thing to say thank you, because I had a group of students who could set up the drums and play and do the whole thing on their own, and I wouldn't even have to be there. So one time I wasn't there, and there's about 40 students performed, and there was a mix-up as to who was supposed to put the drums away, because it was around lunch, and through no fault of anyone's, 5 students put all the drums away for about 40. And when I showed up there on Friday afterwards, they were not happy. And one young person, Kira, came to me in tears and said, we had to put all these drums away. It wasn't fair, you know, and that's not the community you teach us. And in that moment, I knew I was having the impact that I wanted. I had to pretend to be upset with her, to commiserate, you know. But I was very happy. And then finally, I leave you with, in Harlem, we used to have these big shows because I ran an enrichment program at a charter school up there for 10 years, where drum power is one of the bigger parts of it. And we had an advanced performing group that used to practice because the kids just wanted to be there. And we'd have this year-end show. And I had 2 of my oldest students, 8th graders, it was a K-8 school, were cutting up in practice. And I told them, if you keep it up, you're not going to do the performance. Now, I don't usually motivate students by performances, but this was an advanced group. I'm more about the process than the product. That said, one student stopped horsing around, the other one didn't. I sent him home and said he wasn't doing the show after a whole year of practicing. And I called his father. I said, yo, Shawan's going to be upset. When he gets home, I told him he can't do the show. He said, that's okay. I understand, Mr. Lashley. I trust you. And he came back the next year. I didn't change it. I let him make a choice. He didn't use his energy for good things, and then I let him deal with the consequences of it and not make a liar out of me. And his father said, I did a promo video just to showcase drum power, and his father was one of the people interviewed, and he said he appreciated the program and what it had done for his son, but also that his son had 3 fathers, God, him, and me. That's what I think it is to belong, but not just that we have a space for each other, but that we take responsibility and care for each other on that deeper level. Thank you for listening. I don't want to mess your notes up.
You're right. You're right. Thank you so much, Dr. Lashley. I'm going to move on to our next panelist, Araceli Esparza, Latinx poet, writer, and teacher based in Madison with strong migrant farmer roots. Esparza is the owner of Wisconsin Mujer, a social engagement company, and co-hosted the podcast Midwest Mujeres. Esparza.
Yes, hello, thank you, welcome. Hola, bienvenidos. My name is Araceli Esparza, and I am all these things and more. I go around town and the United States internationally, and I hold intersectionality classes based on my art that I have done. There was a 4.5-minute poem that I wrote, but it took a lifetime to write it. Where does my work come from? My work comes from professors like Gloria Anzaldúa that I met here in 1994. Yes, I'm dating myself, at the UW Latina Conference. She is a fabulous Chicana scholar. My work also comes from Gloria Anzaldúa, Bell Hooks, Seferina Lopez, Sylvia Lopez, both union workers here at UW for close to 30 years. There's a little story there, too. My abuelita was working here at the UW Humanities in the early 80s. This is my introduction to the arts a little bit. Humanities students drew a picture of mi abuelita. And so this is the story that I have of the UW Humanities and Arts section, needless to say. But I am here to also highlight the work that they taught me. So I don't know poetry, I learned it from reading it and writing. How did I do that? Because my grandmother knew how to read and write. I had a propensity for that. That's not every Chicana, that's not every Latina. So I create spaces for that healing that we talked about earlier, how the arts can heal us and reclaim our histories and our legacies. I'm not into shaming people for not knowing Spanish. I'm here to celebrate what we do know. And I hope you learn more of that through children book writing. So those are the intersectionalities and the tools that I use. So for many years, when my daughter was growing up here and in New Jersey, I would hold Dia de los Muertos sessions for local schools. And this is how we started, with a jaguar from Mexico City. And that, instead of Black Power, is how I would silence my students as well, using social emotional learning tools. And what we utilized was making a community altar. So bringing in our ancestors. American students or students growing up in the United States rarely ever get to talk about death. We rarely talk to them about grief. It is a misnomer to even grow old in this country. It is unseen and unheard of and uncelebrated. So we talk about that during Day of the Dead. I visit the schools. We learn through empathetic story sharing and telling. Just like my grandmother warning me about the UW Humanities students and me becoming an artist, I might get drawn on one day. Just like that, I brought in stories and moments for them. And we talked about favorite foods that their loved ones left and behind. And through Post-its, we become, all of us, a little bit of a story. So we are taking action with that reflection. Next slide. And I think it's the video, I would hope. Oh, this is my first slide, but go ahead. And this is the animated story that I wrote with Wisconsin Life, which is affiliate of PBS. And I believe there's this little short snippet of it being able to be played if we play it. No, maybe not, okay. Back, that's fine. So you can look it up online. And basically, like I was saying before, it took me a whole lifetime to create all of these different identities. And as a teaching artist, I utilize these identities to talk about intersectionality and bias and racism by showing them to be empathetic leaders. And I ask questions like, how many identities did you see here? What are the modalities of intersectionality? What are the positive things about intersectionality? I also sit on the Equal Opportunities Commission for the City of Madison, so you can imagine that I hear about all these intersectionality ways of oppression. Thankful for the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, who also attended UW-Madison. Very thankful for her work. Had it not been for that, I think a lot of our commissioners would be a little bit off of words at times to understand the enormity, the massive systems that are interlocking in our everyday and prevent us at times for accessing housing, work, all of those things. And so through my animation of Las Chicas and Los Chicos de Blossom Street, which is a real street here in Madison actually, it's a celebration of a barrio, a neighborhood. We are introduced through the protagonist, Luz, who takes all of these little pictures of her life and she interchanges them and tells us all of these little stories. There are kids who have no food. There are kids who are in wheelchairs. And up until about a couple weeks ago, I didn't even see myself in there. But the protagonist grows up with her abuelita, a blind duck, and her tío. I literally stood in the bathroom crying my eyes out because I had given this talk to so many people, given my intersectionality workshop for so many people during the pandemic, and this was kind of like the first time I ever did it in person in live human form. So this is my pandemic baby, because it didn't get published until recently, actually about 6 months ago, did it go out to the public and came out on Wisconsin Life's new episodes for the season. That being said, I recorded it in 2019. So it took about 2.5 years for me to actually see it and teach on it. That is the weight of a lot of artists. That is the journey that we don't talk about oftentimes, is like once we create it, how long it takes to actually bring it out to the world. And this work was really profound for me, and knowing that I wrote it and embodied all of Wisconsin and all of my Spanglish in there, because there are so many moments where I even mispronounce words in Spanish, even in this recording. But that's okay, because that is the consequences of assimilation. That's the consequences of being a Latina growing up in Wisconsin. So if anything, I am embodying completely the Wisconsin voice of all new and coming up first, second, and third generation of Latinos growing up in Wisconsin. Next slide. And I utilize these tools to help folks understand, the interlocking systems, and we talked about that. And so I talk about how we go further in and out. I utilize myself, as we talked about how we utilize our own backgrounds. We utilize my background and the backgrounds of the children that are displayed in through the 4.5-minute video. I thought we had a little clip here for you all. I wanted to bless you all with that clip, but unfortunately we wouldn't be able to do that. But please look it up online, because it's there at pbswisconsin.com. Next slide. So I love to utilize meditation and reflective writing prompts like this one. So what comes up after about intersectionality after the film? We really like to ground our participants through meditation, mindfulness, because honestly I believe that the arts and the intersectionality that we're utilizing for inclusion, to bring in all of these voices, to honor the storyteller, if I really think about why I do the work that I do, I want you to pause. I want us to pause, because being biased, being racist, being stereotypical oftentimes comes because we are thinking too fast and moving too fast. We need to pause. So if anything, I believe that my art and the work that I do, and especially in these workshops that I do with children and with adults, it's to teach them how to pause, to take a breath, to reflect. Again, that SEL that we talked about, and that every good teacher who teaches about art and the intersections of art in our lives should be or attends to do. A lot of things come out when people are free writing. A lot of missteps come out from them, and we try to hold with the courage of a child's heart, to all of these stories, and invoke an understanding. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you so much for my time here today, y'all.
Thank you so much. Our next panelist wasn't able to join us today, but I'm going to take a minute just to speak to the work of Professor Baron Kelly and the Odyssey Project, because it's such a significant outreach into the community. Dr. Kelly is a 4-time Fulbright Scholar and a member of the National Theatre Conference. He has a joint appointment with the Odyssey Project in the Department of Continuing Studies and the Department of Theatre and Drama in the School of Education. And he was unable to make it and sent these words. And I quote, "I have always believed in helping to give voice to the voiceless. The students in the Odyssey Project have a self-confidence and their place and their rights in ways that will help to bring about change. I grew up in a tough neighborhood in New York where a lot of guys I grew up with are now dead. Every Odyssey Project student has gifts that are waiting to be unwrapped. Many students are at the poverty level, and 95% are people of color. The humanities courses and instructors are godsends. I have been involved since the beginning. Now in its 18th year, the Odyssey Project has 4 core programs: Odyssey, the course; Odyssey Junior, children and grandchildren of Odyssey students and alumni; Onward Odyssey, students and alumni continuing to pursue higher educational goal; and Odyssey Behind Bars, credit-bearing and non-credit UW courses to Wisconsin prison. Professor Kelly couldn't be here today, but I absolutely wanted to get in some words about the Odyssey Project and the significance of this work. Our next presenter, our next panelist is Sofía Snow, Director of the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives at UW, which administers the First Wave Hip Hop and Urban Arts Scholarship Program. Sofía is an alumna of the inaugural cohort to graduate from the First Wave program. She is an interdisciplinary performing artist who is passionate about developing talented artists in higher education. Sofía Snow.
Thank you. I know, I got somehow randomly. Use the podium.
Okay, of course.
Where's the short people button? There we go, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Y'all still awake? Did you make it through the snow okay? My name is Sofía, the director of the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives, and as Chris mentioned, an alumna of the first cohort of First Wave. I rejoined OMI, this is my 3rd time moving to Wisconsin. I was an alumna of the first cohort. I got my BSW in social work here. I then moved back to Boston and worked for Boston Public Schools Office of Family and Student Engagement. And then I came back to Madison as the education coordinator, where I focused on recruitment and student programming. I went to New York City for 4 years after that, and was the executive director of a youth arts literary nonprofit called Urban Word NYC. And then in 2019, I came back for the 3rd and final time as the director of Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives. It's a distinct honor to hold this role and to have so many esteemed alumni also on our staff, but also, as Chris mentioned, being the founding artistic director of the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives and First Wave program, to see Professor Walker rise to leadership on this campus. As the director of the Division of the Arts, it also just goes to show selfishly the power of our office to build community, retention, and to support and enhance arts and culture here on our campus climate, and also to bridge UW-Madison to local multicultural arts initiatives off campus and throughout the country. So the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives and the First Wave Hip Hop and Urban Arts Program, scholarship program, we are a part of the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Educational Achievement. We're really excited to be a part of this division as this kind of sole arts unit, because the mission of our division is to enhance diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, as well as to build that sense of belonging, to shift the campus climate, to support faculty, staff, and students of various marginalized identities, but also to bring awareness to the majority culture at UW-Madison as a predominantly white institution. And truly, what better way to do that through the arts? I believe that the arts, and you've heard many examples here today, the arts have a way of touching folks' hearts and minds in a way that policy, rules, regulations, bias reports just don't have the same effect, right? They build that sense of connection, that opportunity to create your own work builds that sense of reflection, exploration of who you are and what you've been through. But that space of gathering where we witness each other's creations, whether or not you consider yourself an artist, I am one who believes that everyone is an artist, but whether or not you consider yourself an artist, being able to witness others' arts through any medium, I think builds that sense of connection, understanding across difference, and ultimately that sense of belonging. So the 3 pillars of our office are academics, arts, and activism. A lot of times people talk about how is a pillar of an office at UW-Madison activism when there's so much to discuss, to explore, to push back against, to try to rebuild, reimagine. But I really am proud of our unit having that as a pillar, because it really allows our students to have a platform and space to speak their mind, and it also gives a space within our university for their voices to be heard, advocated for, and to shift the paradigm. The academics and arts elements, we are a R1 institution, and oftentimes, especially with the program, the First Wave program, we're recruiting young artist activists from all across the country and world. We do have a few international students. They come to UW because of the top tier resources and access to power, truthfully, that they can gain through this university. But as the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives, we're also bridging local artists, national artists, international artists to this institution. And so we have a big focus on research-based art and also creating a space for folks to explore through research, through academic research, and also just the exploration of identity and community itself. And of course, the arts, I often say, is just any kind of creative expression. The young people in our program are proper artists in themselves, and I'll talk a little bit about who First Wave scholars are in a minute. But truthfully, we host various initiatives throughout the year that are workshops, that are open mics, that are a place to gather and share everyone's creativity, because we believe the arts builds that sense of connection, exploration, and building that connection across differences. So I will get into a little bit about what the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives is, what our several initiatives are, but we're probably most well known for our scholarship program. The First Wave Hip Hop and Urban Arts Scholarship is the first and only full tuition scholarship for hip hop and urban arts in the world. We are 16. You've heard about a lot of firsts happening here at UW-Madison, and we're really proud to represent hip-hop culture here in Wisconsin in that way. Oftentimes when we're recruiting pre-college students or we're bringing in guest artists, they're like, really, in Wisconsin? But we just held, where this year we were granted the Interdisciplinary Arts Residency Program through the Division of the Arts to bring in guest artists from all across the country. And we've had artists come in from New York and LA just this semester saying, wow, this is such a pristine campus. There is so much space. There is so much resources. There's so much great community. And so whenever someone says, really, Wisconsin, I always say, you wouldn't believe it, what we got going on over here. So First Wave is a program that recruits young artist activists from all over the country. These young pre-college or first-year college students are true community leaders and artists in their own right. And when they get to UW-Madison, they can major in whatever they want. And that's a really big element of our program, is to allow the students to fully utilize all of the resources at their disposal here at UW-Madison. But the young people themselves are stellar, to say the least. They're youth poet laureates of various cities. They are, activists, well-known activists within their hometowns. They have started their own nonprofits at age 16. They work with their public school districts to teach workshops. Some of them volunteer at their religious centers to host food pantries or deliver groceries. These are young people that before they even got here were already doing incredible work and coming to UW-Madison in cohorts of 15. We accept 15 scholars every year. Allows them to build a sense of community that can yield, retain these students through graduation. So it's always pretty amazing that first year when all of the first waivers kind of gather in their cohort, they're a little intimidated of each other, probably for the first time in a long time. Like, wait, you started a nonprofit where? Wait, you did that? You worked with you told the mayor what? And they come to UW and they meet each other, but it's also a real sense of empowerment to know that with many we can do so much more. And so We're a 4-year program that provides full tuition, and the students, each year the main requirement is, of course, there's academic and GPA and credits and DARS requirements, but beyond that, they complete one project per year called the AAA project that somehow touches on the arts, activism, and academics each year that they're here. So how to get involved? Here's a little bit more. So beyond the First Wave program, I often call them our OMI's student body, but I do view OMI as a unit within our division that is here to create, foster multicultural arts initiatives that gather not just First Wave scholars, not just undergraduate students, not just graduate students, postdocs, faculty, staff, local artists in Madison, national artists from across the country. We really utilize the resources of the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to create these arts and culture gatherings that bring folks together and create that sense of belonging right here on campus. So we have various local and campus partnerships. We run Madison's longest running all ages open mic. It's called Just Bus. It happens every first Friday of the month, where we often have pre-college students, local artists, campus artists, faculty perform, and we also bring in a featured artist that's critically acclaimed, and that artist then performs a 20-minute set and teaches a public workshop the following Saturday. We have all of our events are free in all ages. We host 3 national conferences every year. We just had our staff retreat last week, and I was like, wait a minute, 3? Every fall, we have the Passing the Mic Intergenerational Hip Hop Theater Festival, where this past year, we brought out 40 pre-college youth from Sacramento, DC, Chicago, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm forgetting a city. But we sold out the Play Circle at the Wisconsin Union Theater, which was really fun. And we bring them to UW-Madison. We give them campus tours. We had a great time at the arts department, seeing all of the different resources. And then they have a showcase where they perform that night. So really the Passing the Mic Festival is OMI First Wave's grand recruitment initiative of the year, where we try to bridge young people with this campus and with the professional adult artists that we bring in to have that intergenerational conversation, and also to expose the young people to college access, campus life, and this beautiful university. We also have the Line Breaks Hip Hop Theater Festival every spring, and Line Breaks is a festival that's almost like the end of the year recital for many First Wave scholars. A lot of them are working all year in various collaborative workshops and spaces and present their work as a part of the Line Breaks Festival in the spring. We also bring in nationally acclaimed artists. We partner with faculty, and it's a showcase of hip-hop theater here at UW-Madison. It is a world-renowned festival going on 17 years this spring. And so we're really honored to host that here in Madison. And then every summer we have the Hip Hop in the Heartland, which is an educators institute. It's our 3rd national conference of the year, where we basically create a space for educators, youth workers, teaching artists, mentors, coaches, to basically talk about hip-hop pedagogy, social emotional learning. We've partnered with The Place for several years in the School of Education to pull off this conference, but it's a way to talk about how to create spaces for young people to get free, often through the arts, often through their regular classrooms, but we try to make a space that's always intergenerational, focusing on pre-college, current students, adults, and educators. So that's a little bit about our initiatives. We are very, very much open to partnering. We are here to be a resource to this campus, to the city of Madison. We are here to help produce, to enhance, to provide platforms and spaces for multicultural arts. And so please feel free to reach out to me if you would like to partner in this upcoming year, and follow us on social media. OMI First Wave. Thank you so much.
Wow. What a phenomenal group of people. Activism and the arts, building legacies in Wisconsin and beyond. Creating spaces for future leaders to grow in the authority of who they are as individuals, in the sense of responsibility of who they are as community members, and with the freedom to explore the different pathways that they may choose with which to step into who they're becoming. Thank you all so very much for the work that you do and for speaking so eloquently about it this morning. We have about 12 or so minutes, and I want to make sure I create some space for questions from the audience. So if you have your questions, let's use the QR code to submit those. But I do have one question for all the panelists. When we look at this topic, activism and the arts, right? And Sophia, you talked about activism as a pillar in First Wave. When we talk about activism or artivism, activism in the arts, what exactly are we talking about? What is the expectation then of someone to be an activist, and how does that and the art come together as an expression, as a space? Anyone?
Hello. I was just checking if this is on.
I have just some quick responses. I think anytime I step into a room or a space, there's just always a questioning of where is power held, how is it held, and how is it upheld. I had mentioned that Geeks, for example, has one half of the academic programs supporting it in the US. The programs that are not supporting it are the programs that have all the big budgets to have their own visiting artist lecture series. And so I think sort of looking carefully at how to organize, how to restructure, I think that's a big part of looking at like where the gaps are and how to kind of reinvent the networking to create different powers of support and structure. That seems like a good guiding principle as one component of what activism in my field might be.
Out of art activism, I think it's about reflection. I've done work with Tony Robinson's memorial annual festivities they do here. It's about reflecting what's in the community, what's really been going on, and we can't ignore that. And through art activism, it doesn't, like when you were saying that everyone's an artist, so that's when we really believe that, when things happen in our community and we have no way to express it, art activism is born. That's when it's born, and that's, for me at least, that's been why I was in art activism for so long, reflecting the stories that I grew up here as a first-gen person, in the 80s and 90s. It was terribly different than it is now, but that is why we are doing that. My grandmother dreamed your program up. Those are the reasons why we're here, for art activism, to change those systems of interlocking systems of oppression and break through them through expression, like you were saying. Thank you.
Change. That's a powerful and important word I hear coming up when we talk about activism, to create change, to reflect what's happening in our communities and societies, and to break systems, but again, to create change. Go ahead, Dr. Lashley.
I would just add, I guess that in my view, what we're talking about is how do you create a structure of the work that then invites everybody to participate, but everybody to be owners, and then sort of issues a challenge for change, could be for liberation, but certainly, and as we're talking about today, for activism. And I think that's more or less the same challenge that if you're in an academic unit, you're running a research lab, you're teaching a class, you're running an office. I think the fundamental work is how do we build a structure for doing the work that actually has within it embedded this expectation, and then the space for folks to recraft, to deconstruct, and then reconstruct in ways that they're going to find empowering and then allow them to feel comfortable enough to take these sorts of steps. So it's a much more complicated thing. I think it really does require looking at how we go about the everyday routines of doing the work. What do those look like? For example, one of the challenges I always give to the students, we start with this fundamental question, which is, who do you want to be? Not what kind of career do you want to have, but who do you want to be in the world? What kind of relationships do you want to have? You know, what do you want your role to be in your community? And then the second question, what are the steps that you're taking to get there? That we're then checking in on during the course of the year, not as just a thing that floats out there as an idea and then is never refocused. So I think we mirror that in terms of how we approach activism in our own situations as well, just creating a structure.
Go ahead, Sophia.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said, and I also just want to shine a little light about, I think, an ongoing debate in the arts community about, is art itself activism? Or is there activism where the arts are involved? Or do the arts inspire activism? I won't be so presumptuous as to tell you what the answer to that is, but I do want to shine light on that conversation where I think my personal opinion is that the art, celebrating and fostering spaces for arts and culture to be shared and witnessed, I think pushes people towards connection, pushes people sometimes to be more aware of their own biases, pushes people to maybe have tough conversations with others or even just within themselves. But activism really comes, to me, again, my opinion, when you actually do work that shifts the existing oppressive structures. And so I think the arts is super intertwined into that, whether or not it's a painting or a dance concert. It could be the documentary you watched on Netflix. It could be the book, the fictional book that you read about, you know, a fictional location with fictional characters. It could be whatever that creative thing is that inspires you to think a little more deeply and inspires you to act, to go do something. I think that's the role for me. I think the arts are permanently intertwined with activism. I don't think any activist can pretend like they weren't moved by something creative to keep going. But there is a debate, and there are others who do believe that the art itself is the activism, and I just feel like I would be remiss to let this panel go by without highlighting that.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
I'll just add one more thing to, I think, speak to what my colleagues here have spoken, which is to consistently and repeatedly assert how we define value in the field of the arts, what value the arts bring. I had a recent interaction with Kathy Chazen in which I was asked, well, what are some like notable accomplishments of recent alumni? And so I mentioned one Fulbright winner who went to New Zealand to study glass and the presence of glass in the earth from the movement of tectonic plates with researchers at a university in New Zealand. And I recounted another Fulbright scholar who traveled to Sweden to study with the only neon fabricator in the country of Sweden, and another alumni who just came back from the Arctic Circle on a residency there. And the reply that I got was, are any of them selling their work? And so we're speaking really different value systems there, right? And I was so dumbfounded by that response. I couldn't really say that in the moment, but I think it's really important to sort of assert and speak to these values that the arts bring and activism in the arts bring, and when and how those do or don't correlate with other systems of value.
Yeah, thank you for that. As we think about building legacies in Wisconsin and beyond, and I think through your work you've highlighted how you are redefining community even, right? Or communities and intersecting communities, and communities that are existing in physical spaces but connected through the metaverse, so to speak, in terms of new programming and new access. I like to use a term that one of my friends in Jamaica used recently, Neela Ibanks at the Edna Mandela College. She talked about legacy carriers with vision. And I can't help but see how through your work, you're creating space for what we may call future leaders, which Neela Ibanks is calling legacy carriers with vision. And so for folks who are interested then, right, in doing this type of work, in creating these types of spaces, what are some of the basic infrastructure that makes something like this possible?
Access, inclusion, resources, all of that. Resources. And thinking about inclusion from the beginning, I do a lot of community outreach work in rural Wisconsin with the libraries for bilingual and bicultural folks. And that's including Black and first-generation immigrants, too. Because we don't have reflections of our lives in rural Wisconsin, even though we are there. We've been there, and we continue to be there in pockets. And that's where I get sad too sometimes, because I'm like, the folk art of our arts is losing. And unless, when you're talking about value, it's like we need to uplift the weavers, the bakers, you know, the las abuelitas that tell the stories. All of that needs to be somehow digitally recorded, or somehow there needs to be funding and resources to that movement in the arts to capture those stories in rural Wisconsin and as I say, the iguanas singing in the snow phenomena, or flowers that grow in the snow. Because we are here, but yes, resources, access, and inclusion from the beginning. And I think the power drum circles that have been done here in our community for so many years, the legacy of activism from the 1950s and 60s in Wisconsin, in Madison in particular, has been quite well recorded from our white counterculture upbringing. And I applaud that, but I also want to see, how did immigrant first generation folks interweave in that time period? How is art activism being woven into, say, the state capitol representation, or anywhere in our spaces, in public spaces? So as a teaching artist, that's where I'm concerned in, is public spaces and representation in that. And a lot of times we gotta push that through resources. How can we all support that? By making that part of your planning and or giving either through spaces, resources, mentorship, sponsorship, naming who's not in the world.
Thank you. Thank you. We have one question. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Jocelyn Diaz-Valdez. I'm glad I'm so happy to hear the work that you are all doing, very exciting. I want to speak about a very marginalized group. So in talking about shifting oppressive structures through activism, and my question is to you, Dr. Walker, to you, Dr. Charleston, to you, Provost Schultz, and to all of my colegas, colleagues in the room. What are you all doing? What are we doing for undocumented students who are often at the margins of all funding, resources at this campus? What are we doing? Are we advocating for funding? Are we advocating for them to be allowed into our scholarship programs? Are we doing resources? What are we doing for our undocumented students?
Hey, Jocelyn, that is an excellent question. There remains a challenge as it relates to addressing adequately and effectively this population of students. We have been sort of working with colleagues who have been able to navigate some legal landmines, if you will, around how we as a public institution can effectively address this population. To be sure, there's much more work that needs to be done, and we are exploring ways in which this doesn't answer your question, Jocelyn, and I hear your passion and it's a very good one. But we are regularly trying to navigate the legal landscape in terms of supporting students from this population. It's I don't know, it sounds kind of like an excuse, but it's a reality that because of our position as a public institution, we have more constraints on us that would not enable us to just, freely address this population. It's not for the lack of trying or understanding that there's a need in terms of serving this population of folks. And so it remains, at best, a creative approach in terms of working with community organizations who are working with these populations and others who may not have the constraints that we have as a public institution.
I think the single most important priority is we have students who've lived in Wisconsin all their lives and they're getting charged out-of-state tuition, and that's a political issue. And so through ballot box activism and all, because there's a bunch of states around the country that will give in-state tuition to undocumented students who've resided in the state their whole lives. In Wisconsin, we don't, and we need to change that. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's a political issue.
And that doesn't stop us from continuing the work, and the work continues. And so we offer, the opportunity for folks, creative suggestions, partners. We call it brain wrestling, to brain wrestle around these issues, and we will continue to work to do that. I know that does not necessarily satisfy most folks. That is the political reality that we're living in, and we're still striving to navigate that, to support all of our students and even potential students and families in the community.
Thank you for addressing that question. We're at time, but I want to at least get one of the online questions addressed. But I'll also highlight the ASAP program within the Division of the Arts that fund student programming and student gathering and student activities that center community and activism that uses the arts. One of the recipients of that fund last year, that grant, were the Dreamers, which was a group of students who support the work of and the needs and rights and challenges that DACA recipients experience here on our campus. But like the provost and Dr. Charleston said, this is creative work, and we're working together on multiple fronts. Go ahead, Sophia.
Oh, this is not anymore. Hello. Hi. Just real quick, because the First Wave program works really closely with Jocelyn. She's a champion of students of various marginalized identities trying to navigate the financial aid system, trying to navigate the admission system, trying to navigate how to stay, how to be retained and to be able to graduate here. So I just want to shout you out, Jocelyn, for bringing up that really important comment. And really briefly, before we at least take one public question, is that I think voicing that concern in a public space like this with our leaders here is a chance to do some collective organizing around that work. And so, First Wave, throughout the history of our program, we have international students. We have students who can get some of our funding, not all of our funding, can get some of our resources, not all of our resources. And so it is also a pressing issue within our division, within our university. And so for other folks who that really resonates with, I hope that we can touch base while we're here together. Shout out to being able to gather again in person. But that's really where that creative work happens, is when people put their concerns together and make some noise. So I just want to thank you and offer that invitation to other folks to not just let that question slip by. It's a real pressing issue. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All of these questions that were submitted online are important. I'm gonna, and each of the panelists have a wrap-up that they'll share, but I want to pull out this question because it centers around wellness. How do you manage to reserve energy for your own art and your own personal artist lives, given the work that you do? And if you can respond to that as well in giving your final wrap-up statement, that'd be great. Wellness, how do you take care of you as a part of doing that work? One of the other questions was, what do you need from campus leaders and from community leaders to support the work that you do? I want to highlight that question as well because I felt like our panelists answered that in the response about the need for resources. And so even in planning, where does the art, where does community, where does the opportunities for these spaces to exist come into that work? So who's in the room when we're having those early conversations, I believe, is the response. Please, thank you all so much. Final thoughts.
Man, I took the mic before you threw in that last part, man. I think in terms of the wellness piece, I guess it falls to us. So I just want to be clear, what self-care is not taking a break so that you can come back and be more productive. Self-care is understanding that you are more than your productivity. So, well, thank you. I just think as we get into the mindset, you take a break, man, I'm gonna come back ready to do more work. And you're still defining yourself just by your work. So, that said, on the other side, I think it's important to make your work part of the wellness, since we spend so much time and energy on it. Me personally, I'm running an NEA research project. I'm director of programs at Place, which means I'm working with SOE faculty of all shapes and sizes and ideas to make stuff. But I always teach one drum power class all year long for me, because I need that connection. And I managed to convince my bosses and others that that connection to the community actually feeds the work. But you have to know yourself well enough to then advocate for that. As far as the second part of the question, what do we need from folks? Clearly, we need resources. The arts always need resources, but I think we also need to be thought of as not just a viable, but a really powerful way forward for lots of different things. I know that's Professor Walker's mission at Division of the Arts, that we think campus-wide about how to bring in the arts. So I would just encourage, I think, campus-wide that folks utilize us, utilize people like Faisal Abdullah, who is Associate Dean in the School of Ed, specifically for the arts. And when you think of ways that artistic ways of mind and thinking might move forward some of your agendas, either around diversity, inclusion, and culturally sustaining practices or any of it, to reach out and think about that as a possible way.
Thank you.
With regard to wellness and the first question, I think my experience of becoming a mother provides just a very logistical, practical response, which is that I protect my time in my own creative practice by making sure it's scheduled into my schedule. But also I would want to sort of speak to the notion that the boundaries between what is my artwork, what is my activism, what is my teaching, what is my research, what is my service, I struggle with creating delineations between those because they are all really interwoven and speak to each other, and they also provide me a fulfillment that requires this collaboration and accountability. And then for the second question, earlier when we were speaking around, what does it take to move into this space, I from an individual point of view, I was thinking about the qualities of persistence and risk. There's really considerable risk in me creating this nonprofit and hiring 2 part-time alumni to do that work and asking the Glass community to support that. And so I guess sort of support outside of the institution as well, especially for entities that are created specifically to be neutral to institutional boundaries, is a definite need.
I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert at wellness. That's not what I got on this panel. I'm just kidding. I think it's been said before, I really appreciated Yorel's discussion about discipline. I think wellness and your own arts practice take a lot of protecting. And I don't know about you all, but I'm sure I'm not the only one that was burnt out in the last 2.5 years. But we feel the effects of not holding those boundaries. We feel the effects of not having that discipline. And it takes energy to even keep a practice, to keep that boundary, to make that intentional scheduled time. But finding your own kind of well-being worth it is what motivates me to keep those boundaries. But also I find that very practically making time. Like for a while, I was taking a poetry workshop that was 3 hours every Monday night. So it was after a long day and you're tired and you have no creative energy. 6 to 9 p.m., I'm on Zoom with other people trying to write my own poems and just knowing what that did for my own mental health and my own practice. Or last night, I was working with our touring ensemble in their rehearsal, kind of in a director-creator mode. As people have mentioned, keeping that connection to your own arts practice helps inform your decisions as a leader in your unit or organization. So, yeah.
So where do we find respite and healing? For myself, just like we were saying, some of us are parents. We hold all kinds of different hats as artists. We are the cultural carriers for our community at times, the reflection, the one in the room that says, please don't forget la que cocina, please don't forget the women that cook, the women that are weavers, the women that are storytellers. So I created as well a pandemic baby called Midwest Mujeres, which is a nonprofit organization up and coming to teach mujeres the power of storytelling and through that self-empowerment. So how do I find my respite? Is through land. The land here has really informed me. All I ever grew up was hearing about a different land that wasn't the land that I encompassed. It was the land of my parents. So even though I was in this land, I had no navigation of this land. And the snowdrifts and the curves and the slides and iguanas laughing in the snow moments, didn't get to that until somebody wrote it into a picture book, and I saw myself there in my mid-30s. So time is finally catching up with us here in Wisconsin. Time is finally catching up for children, for like my children who are growing up and going to MMSD. So when you ask me what does the UW Arts Department can do for us, please teach our teachers to be better teachers with children of color. My daughter was denied using the color purple and brown to color herself in a self-portrait. She was denied using the color brown. She has dyslexia. She's also a pianist and up-and-coming People Program participant who hopefully one day will take the stage here. Yeah. Full circle. She will be the first UW grad if we make it. But she didn't grow up with those stories of this place being very welcoming. Her grandmother comes with stories of this place not being welcoming. So this is a stand, and I love the fact that we got to take up all the space for art in our community in Wisconsin because we are an economic driver, we are a tourist center, we are the shining light in here in the Midwest. Along with Minneapolis, Milwaukee, and Chicago, we are that trifecta, and communities of colors and diversity, we got to really make room for that inclusion through resources and space sharing and sponsoring and naming us when we're not in the room. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. Please give it up for wonderful panelists. Thank you. Thank you.
Make some noise for Professor Walker.
Thank you all so very much. Dr. Charleston.
Wow. Very powerful panel. Building legacies has to begin with remembering. That's such a powerful statement. And art and art making carries legacies and exists to inspire new and brighter futures. I love the mantra of the division. Very excited to collaborate with my colleague, Professor Chris Walker, in this work, Arts for Everyone, Everywhere. Because arts are essential and many times foundational to the idea of belonging. This idea, I mean, there's so many nuggets that I got from this panel, and thinking about the work of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Also being about power, right, and empowering. The end goal is empowerment, and sort of taking that liberatory mindset to the work. Professor Lashley's, or Dr. Lashley's work around identity, agency, and belonging as human needs, right? It's really, really important. And so it's interesting because we all activate in very different ways. I worked with students a lot in my career, and had to really find that balance between our work, our academics, and whatever work you do, and activism and art. And for a while there, on a personal note, I sort of lost that artistic expression for academic writing. I lost my poetry writing and songwriting for academic writing. And it was a mentor who saw me give a presentation. I was out of the country, and I gave a presentation on broadening participation in science, technology, engineering, math. And I thought it was very, very good, very solid research. And I presented, and when I got done, one of my mentors said to me, he said, "What was that?" I said, "Well, what do you mean? This solid work, solid methodology. It was great." He was like, "That wasn't you." He said, "You have to bring yourself to the work." And sometimes that's a challenge. So our panelists talked about bringing our whole selves, and that, arts can sort of heal us and reclaim histories and legacies, and that sort of that intersectionality in the arts that enable us to bring our whole selves to the space. And so while I didn't do it in this time, I've learned that to even bring to my academic work my art. So it's not uncommon for me to sing a song giving a presentation, or to begin a presentation with some spoken word. I almost did that for y'all today, but I was like, I'm gonna hold back. But it's important that we recognize and remember that, our intersectionalities, that when we bring that together in the space that we're either moving forward or away from power, understanding and recognizing where's that power held, how is it held, does it need to be reconstructed in the space? Because arts has a way of touching folks' hearts and minds in ways that other policies and practices don't. I love the idea that we learned from this panel that witnessing others' arts build connections and even explanations, right? Or explorations across differences. And art activism is born out of the need to express and break through oppression with expression. Such powerful. So I hope you all gained as much as I gained from that. After lunch, as we look ahead to the rest of the agenda, we'll delve into our panel discussion on the 2021 Campus Climate Survey. In the fall of 2021, more than 13,000 students took part in an exercise to understand their thoughts, their experiences, their concerns about this campus in terms of the Student Campus Climate Survey. So the results from the survey are being used. We believe in data-informed decision-making. We heard yesterday some questions about data and how both quantitatively and qualitatively they can inform and impact how we move an agenda forward to interweave equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging practices into our policies, into our practices, into our curriculum, to ensure that folks know that they belong here from a faculty, from a staff, and from a student's perspective. We know that from 2016 to 2021, not much has changed, and while folks may think that that's a horrible thing, and arguably in some ways it can be, if you think about what happened in society between 2016 and 21, that we didn't have more negative experiences means that we were probably doing a couple of things right in trying to address the concerns of society as a whole and that impact that it would have on our students, our faculty, and staff here on this campus. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. We have a committee. We know that despite, some positive feedback on the survey, students from historically underrepresented and marginalized group consistently responded less favorably. So again, with the advances that we've made, with the progress that we've made as a campus, as a community, it's clear that we still have much work to do to create that genuine sense of belonging characterized by inclusive excellence on this campus. So following lunch, we'll kick off that panel discussion to understand the numbers a little bit and gained a little bit of insight from folks who were central and involved in that effort. And so as we dismiss for lunch, please wait to be called on. I think we're going to hear from the voice of God is what we call that speaker to release us. And we're going to be starting with those tables closest to the window. So if you please come to the far door to my left, the Varsity Hall entrance, and we'll exit with that group first. Then when prompted, the middle section will go, and those tables closest to the main door will exit last. I will see you all. We have a lunch panel discussion that's going to begin at about 11:15. We're a little bit behind, so I don't know if we're still going to start that on time. I'm looking at Crystal here, but she's shaking her head yes. So let's move expeditiously as we are released. See you all at the panel discussion after lunch.